What if I told you some countries are vanishing, not from war or disaster, but because too few babies are being born? Picture Japan, schools closing, towns emptying, and a future where the elderly outnumber the young. This isn't just a challenge, it's a looming population collapse. By 2050, Japan's population could shrink by over 20 million people. Nations like South Korea and Italy face similar fates, with birth rates so low they can't sustain their populations. In this documentary, we'll uncover how these countries are grappling with a crisis that could redefine their very existence. What happens when youth disappears? Japan's economic miracle turns demographic nightmare. Japan's post-war economic miracle came with unexpected consequences. During the 1960s, Japan's industrial workforce expanded at record speed, creating what became known as the economic animal generation. These workers regularly pulled all-night shifts, many keeping futons in office closets to sleep between marathon work sessions. The term salaryman emerged to describe white-collar employees who devoted their lives entirely to their companies. This extreme work ethic transformed Japan into the world's second-largest economy by 1968. This rapid economic ascent came at a steep cultural cost. Like a double-edged sword, companies demanded unwavering loyalty, offering lifetime employment in exchange for total commitment. Workdays often stretched past midnight, leaving little room for personal lives. Marriage and child-rearing became secondary priorities, with men relying on wives to manage homes and raise children. While this arrangement aligned with traditional gender roles, it planted the seeds for future demographic challenges. By the 1990s, the economic bubble burst and cultural attitudes shifted. Younger generations, disillusioned by their parents' grueling work lives and strained marriages, began rejecting these norms. Sociologists coined the term herbivore men to describe males who avoided romantic relationships and corporate servitude. Between 1985 and 2015, the percentage of unmarried Japanese men aged 30 to 34 tripled from 14% to 47%. Women, too, postponed or abandoned marriage, prioritizing personal fulfillment and financial independence. The demographic consequences of these shifts are stark. Japan's fertility rate plummeted to 1.3 children per woman, far below the 2.1 needed for population replacement. Nearly 30% of Japanese citizens are over 65, with the median age now 48.6 years. Government projections show the population shrinking from 126 million today to 97 million by 2050. Bustling factories have given way to ghostly neighborhoods, with over 8 million homes standing vacant nationwide. In some rural areas, like Nagoro, scarecrows outnumber living residents. Desperate measures highlight the scale of the crisis. The town of Ama offers couples $15,000 per child, with additional payments for subsequent births. Yet even substantial incentives fail to reverse the trend. In 2022, Japan recorded fewer than 800,000 births against 1.4 million deaths. Basic societal functions now reflect these shifts. Major diaper manufacturers have shifted production to adult incontinence products, while hundreds of schools close annually due to a lack of students. Labor shortages are so severe that some companies actively recruit elderly employees, with 13% of firms having no mandatory retirement age. The roots of this crisis lie in Japan's post-war economic strategy. Lifetime employment practices and grueling work hours made balancing career and family nearly impossible. Restrictive housing policies kept urban apartments small and expensive, discouraging family formation. Meanwhile, outdated gender norms left working mothers without adequate support. Today, closed maternity wards and shuttered pediatric clinics stand as stark reminders of these choices. What began as an economic miracle has spiraled into a self-inflicted population crisis, showing how short-term prosperity can lead to long-term existential threats. Service industries are already buckling under labor shortages. Convenience stores rely on self-checkout systems as franchise owners struggle to find staff. Rural hospitals lack obstetricians, forcing pregnant women to travel hours for care. The construction industry, despite offering wages 40% above the national average, faces severe worker shortages, jeopardizing infrastructure maintenance. Even Tokyo's iconic taxi fleets now include drivers in their 80s. Economic ripple effects compound the problem. Pension systems designed for continuous population growth now support 2 workers per retiree, a ratio projected to drop to 1.3 by 2050. Government debt exceeds 260% of GDP, with borrowing propping up social programs. Younger generations inherit this burden while grappling with their own demographic challenges. Many companies still resist workplace reforms, clinging to unpaid overtime and after-hours socializing that discourage parenting. Cultural resistance to immigration worsens the labor crisis. Foreign workers make up just 2% of Japan's workforce despite relaxed visa rules. Language barriers and social isolation hinder integration, while many jobs exclude non-Japanese applicants. Industries like agriculture and nursing rely heavily on foreign trainees, yet visa programs discourage long-term stays. Without significant immigration reform, Japan's population decline seems locked in, a stark reminder of how delayed consequences can reshape a nation. South Korea's education arms race leaves no room for families. South Korea faces a demographic crisis fueled by an education system that leaves little room for family life. The country spends nearly 8% of GDP on private education, the highest rate among developed nations. Most families invest heavily in after-school academies called hagwons, where children receive intensive test preparation. An average middle school student attends 3 different hagwons daily after regular school hours, often studying until midnight. While this system produces exceptional academic results, South Korean students consistently rank near the top in global math and science assessments. It places immense pressure on both parents and children. The education arms race begins early. Parents often enroll children in English immersion programs as young as age 3. By elementary school, students memorize dozens of vocabulary words daily and tackle advanced math concepts far beyond their grade level. High schoolers, juggling school, hagwon classes, and self-study average just 5 hours of sleep per night. The relentless focus on university entrance exams drives 93% of high school graduates to pursue higher education, but leaves little time for social or emotional development. One high school student described a routine. I wake up at 6 a.m., go to school, then hagwon until 11 p.m., and study until 2 a.m. I don't remember the last time I had dinner with my family. This system also imposes crushing financial burdens. The average family spends $1,500 monthly on private education, consuming nearly 20% of household income. Many parents take second jobs or even private education loans to cover these costs. The cycle is self-perpetuating. Parents invest heavily in education, hoping their children will secure high-paying jobs. But those same jobs later demand such long hours that employees struggle to raise families of their own. Housing costs exacerbate the problem. A typical apartment in Seoul costs 18.5 times the median annual income, making it one of the most unaffordable housing markets worldwide. Many young couples delay marriage because they cannot afford homes, with the average first-time homebuyer now aged 43. Over 65% of South Koreans in their 20s live with their parents due to housing costs. Even married couples often live apart. Fathers work in cities, while mothers raise children in cheaper suburban areas, a phenomenon known as juryoji families. Gender inequality further discourages family formation. Women earn just 61% of what men make and face strong cultural expectations to quit their jobs after childbirth. Working mothers report spending 3 times longer on household chores than their husbands. Nearly 40% of female university graduates remain unmarried, with many rejecting what they call marriage imperialism. Some women have embraced the free movement, refusing dating, marriage, and childbearing entirely to avoid career penalties. The demographic consequences are stark. South Korea's fertility rate dropped to 0.78 children per woman in 2022, the lowest ever recorded worldwide. Population projections show the country shrinking from 51 million today to just 27 million by 2070 if current trends persist. Already, more than 3,000 schools have closed since 2000 due to declining enrollment. In rural areas like Yangji County, every elementary school is projected to shut down within 5 years unless trends reverse. Government efforts to boost birth rates have seen limited success. Since 2006, over $200 billion has been spent on incentives like tax breaks, housing subsidies, and direct payments. The latest program offers $10,000 per newborn, plus monthly payments until the child turns 7. Yet birth rates continue to fall. 2023 saw another 8% decline compared to 2022. Critics argue these policies fail to address root causes like education costs and workplace discrimination. Corporate culture compounds parenting challenges. Despite a 2018 law capping workweeks at 52 hours, weak enforcement means many employees still work late to demonstrate loyalty. Schools often schedule mandatory weekend activities, and nearly 70% of working mothers report pressure to resign after pregnancy announcements. Even progressive companies struggle. One major tech firm's on-site childcare center remains empty because employees fear career penalties for using it. The education system resists reform. Private hagwons generate $24 billion annually, creating powerful opposition to regulation. Attempts to enforce 10 p.m. curfews for academies led some to move classes online. Universities maintain strict entrance quotas, fueling competition, while corporations prioritize elite school graduates in hiring. These structural barriers keep education costs rising despite falling student populations. Cultural shifts suggest deeper transformations. A 2023 survey found 45% of young South Koreans view marriage as obsolete, while 38% see no need for children. Pet ownership has surged 40% over the past decade, with urban spending on pets now exceeding spending on children. Whether these trends reflect modernization or crisis, South Korea's experience shows how systems designed for economic success can lead to demographic collapse when pushed to extremes. Italy's regional divide, empty villages, crowded cities. Italy's demographic crisis reveals a nation split into two different worlds. The industrial north maintains moderate population levels, while southern villages empty completely. Since 2014, southern Italy has lost 1.2 million residents, even as the national population declined by just 400,000. Young adults leave rural areas for northern cities or foreign job markets, creating ghost towns where only the elderly remain. In Molise, one of Italy's smallest regions, nearly 40% of villages have lost over half their population since 2000. Schools and hospitals close as tax bases vanish, leaving these areas even less viable for new residents. The national fertility rate sits at 1.24 children per woman, far below replacement level. Italy has recorded more deaths than births every year since 2015, with 2022 seeing a record gap of 331,000. Northern cities like Milan and Bologna maintain slightly higher fertility rates, around 1.4, supported by internal migration and international arrivals. Meanwhile, southern regions like Sardinia and Basilicata post rates below 1.0, creating demographic freefall zones where recovery becomes nearly impossible. Economic instability directly suppresses births. Despite strong Catholic cultural influences, marriage and birth rates have plummeted. The average Italian woman now has her first child at 32, among Europe's highest ages. Nearly 70% of Italians aged 18 to 34 still live with their parents due to financial constraints, delaying family formation indefinitely. Youth unemployment exceeds 25% nationwide, reaching 50% in some southern areas. Temporary contracts dominate the job market, with only 32% of workers under 35 holding permanent positions. Regions with higher youth employment show slightly better fertility rates, but the overall trend remains bleak. Some dying towns attempt radical solutions. Over 100 municipalities now sell abandoned homes for €1. hoping to attract new residents. The Sicilian town of Sambuca drew global attention for this scheme, selling 16 properties in 2019. However, most buyers are foreign retirees or vacation home investors rather than young families. Without local jobs, even free housing fails to reverse declines. In Molise, villages like Civita di Bagneregio, accessible only by footbridge, have just a handful of full-time residents despite similar programs. These efforts underscore a harsh reality. Without economic foundations, demographic recovery remains out of reach. Emigration compounds Italy's challenges. Germany hosts over 650,000 Italian-born workers, mostly young professionals. The UK, Switzerland, and France each attract over 200,000 more. This brain drain disproportionately affects southern Italy, where 40% of university graduates leave within 5 years of completing their degrees. Puglia alone loses an estimated €1 billion annually in educated labor value as doctors, engineers, and researchers seek opportunities abroad. Return rates are minimal. Only 8% of Italian immigrants come back after 5 years away. Unlike internal migration, this permanent loss deprives Italy of potential parents and taxpayers. The pension system strains under demographic pressures. Italy spends 16% of GDP on retirement benefits, Europe's highest proportion. The system relies on constant new contributors, but now has just 1.7 workers per pensioner. Southern regions face particular crises. Calabria, for instance, has more pensioners than active workers. Successive governments have raised retirement ages, but avoided deeper reforms for fear of voter backlash. By 2040, analysts project pensions could consume 22% of GDP unless drastic changes occur. Without interventions, Italy's regional divides will deepen. ISTA projections show northern cities stabilizing around 2035 due to internal migration, while southern regions may lose 50% of their remaining population by 2050. Already, 15% of southern municipalities risk complete depopulation within 20 years. As younger generations concentrate in prosperous northern pockets, Italy increasingly resembles two distinct demographic nations sharing one fragile state. Russia's shrinking workforce weakens military ambitions. Russia's population decline presents a direct threat to its military and economic ambitions. The country's population peaked in 1993 at 148.6 million and has decreased steadily since then, despite government efforts to reverse the trend. Current estimates place Russia's population at 143 million, with projections showing a decline to 135 million by 2050. Alcohol-related deaths contribute significantly to the problem, with Russian men having an average life expectancy of just 64 years, nearly a decade below the global average. Heavy drinking accounts for over 30% of deaths among working-age males. Birth rates remain low at 1.5 children per woman, insufficient to sustain population levels without immigration. The Ukraine war has worsened these demographic challenges. Approximately 1 million Russians, mostly young professionals, left the country following the 2022 invasion to avoid conscription. Another 300,000 military-aged men fled after the partial mobilization announcement in September 2022. This exodus hit critical sectors like technology and engineering, with an estimated 10% of IT specialists emigrating within 6 months. Sanctions further depressed living standards, discouraging family formation. Rawstat data shows marriage rates dropped 15% in 2022, while abortions increased 8%, reflecting wartime uncertainty. Military readiness suffers directly from these demographic pressures. Russia needs approximately 1.2 million active personnel to maintain its armed forces, but only 700,000 males reach conscription age annually. To compensate, the Defense Ministry lowered health standards for draftees and raised the maximum conscription age to 30. Some units now include soldiers in their 50s, while others deploy penal recruits with minimal training. The military increasingly resembles an aging machine, patched together with outdated parts that struggle to function. The pre-war exercises already revealed personnel gaps, A 2021 drill involved just 40,000 soldiers, despite plans for 150,000. These limitations undermine Russia's capacity for sustained conflicts, as shown by heavy reliance on mercenary groups like Wagner. Economic impacts mirror these military challenges. Russia's workforce peaked in 2015 with 76 million workers and now loses about 500,000 annually. This decline strains tax revenues, as the working-age population supports 42 million pensioners, a ratio that worsens each year. The pension system consumes 8.5% of GDP and requires constant subsidies. Recent reforms increased retirement ages, but avoided deeper structural changes for political reasons. Labor shortages are particularly acute in oil and gas fields, where 35% of workers are expected to retire within 5 years. Without sufficient replacements, these industries face declining output, threatening the backbone of Russia's economy. Rural areas illustrate the broader demographic collapse. In Siberian villages, there are often just 4 working-age adults for every retiree. The Far East has lost 20% of its population since 1991, with entire settlements abandoned along the Chinese border. Local governments offer free land and tax exemptions to attract settlers, but few take up the offer. Even with incentives, remote areas lack basic services like reliable electricity or medical care. In one Siberian town, the last school closed after its only teacher retired, leaving families to relocate or homeschool their children. Such stories highlight the cascading effects of depopulation, where shrinking communities struggle to sustain even essential functions. State efforts to boost birth rates have shown limited success. The Mother Heroine Award introduced in 2022 provides 1 million rubles, $11,000, for women bearing 10 children, but fewer than 500 families qualified nationwide. More common programs like Maternity Capital, a $7,000 payment for second children, slightly increased birth rates among urban middle-class families. However, rising inflation eroded these benefits, with childcare costs increasing 25% since 2022. Most families report spending 40% of income on basic needs, leaving little for additional children. Regional disparities persist. Muslim-majority areas like Chechnya maintain fertility rates near replacement level, while Slavic regions average just 1.3 children per woman. Labor shortages reshape industries nationwide. Construction firms report 30% vacancy rates despite offering wages 50% above pre-war levels. Manufacturers automate rapidly, with industrial robot installations increasing 120% since 2020. Even with these measures, analysts estimate Russia needs 4 million immigrant workers by 2030 to maintain economic output. Current immigration flows come primarily from Central Asia, but xenophobia and bureaucratic hurdles limit integration. Only 15% of migrants obtain permanent residency annually, and attacks on migrant workers increased 45% in 2023, reflecting growing social tensions. These demographic trends directly undermine Russia's strategic ambitions. A shrinking workforce and aging population strain the economy, while military readiness falters under personnel shortages. Without significant policy changes, Russia's ability to sustain its geopolitical goals will continue to erode, leaving the country increasingly reliant on short-term fixes that fail to address the root causes of its decline. China's one-child policy backfires spectacularly. China's one-child policy, introduced in 1980, was designed to curb population growth but triggered a cascade of long-term consequences. Enforced through heavy fines, forced sterilizations, and mandatory abortions, the policy reduced China's population by an estimated 400 million over 4 decades. While it achieved its immediate goal, the policy left a profound demographic and cultural legacy. Even after its end in 2016, China's fertility rate remains one of the world's lowest, at just 1.15 children per woman, reflecting deep-rooted economic and societal shifts. The policy's effects ripple through every aspect of Chinese society, starting with a stark gender imbalance. Traditional preferences for sons, combined with the spread of ultrasound technology in the 1980s, led to widespread sex-selective abortions. By 2020, there were 34 million more men than women in the 15 to 39 age group. In rural areas, the ratio sometimes exceeds 130 males for every 100 females. These bare branches, men unlikely to marry, are concentrated in poorer provinces, where studies link their presence to rising crime rates and social instability. The imbalance has left many families grappling with the emotional and economic strain of unfulfilled expectations. Labor shortages now threaten economic growth, as the working-age population peaked at 925 million in 2014 and declines by several million annually. Factories struggle to find young workers, even as urban youth unemployment surpasses 20%. In manufacturing hubs like Guangdong, assembly line positions face 30% vacancy rates, while the construction industry is aging rapidly. The average worker is now over 45 years old. Automation offers some relief, but cannot fully replace human labor in sectors like healthcare and elder care, where personal interaction remains essential. For families, the policy's legacy is deeply personal. The 4-2-1 problem looms large for the one-child generation, now in their 30s, who must support 2 parents and 4 grandparents alone. Traditional family care networks have eroded under demographic pressure, leaving many struggling to balance work and caregiving. A single mother in Beijing, for instance, described how she juggles her job while caring for her aging parents, lamenting the lack of affordable senior care options. With just 8.3 hospital beds per 1,000 people, far fewer than in developed nations, China's healthcare system strains to meet the needs of its aging population. Nursing homes remain rare and expensive, housing only 3% of elderly Chinese, compared to 8% in the U.S. rural areas, bear the brunt of these demographic shifts. Over 70% of villages have seen population declines exceeding 20% since 2010, as younger residents migrate to cities. Abandoned homes now to the countryside, with an estimated 50 million rural houses standing vacant. Local governments attempt to consolidate emptying villages into central towns, but these efforts often fail due to a lack of jobs and services. The average farmer is now 53 years old, raising concerns about the future of agriculture and food security. The property market reflects these demographic realities. Developers, anticipating continued population growth, built millions of apartments that now sit empty. Ghost cities like Ordos feature entire districts of uninhabited buildings. Housing construction, once a cornerstone of economic activity, has slowed dramatically, with ripple effects across industries. Steel production, for example, dropped 10% in 2023 as construction demand faltered. Local governments, heavily reliant on land sales for revenue, now face budget crises. Cultural shifts further entrench low fertility rates. Generations raised under the one-child policy often view small families as the norm. A 2023 survey found that 15% of married women under 35 plan to remain childless, up from just 3% in 2015. Economic pressures reinforce these attitudes. Urban couples cite high housing and education costs as major deterrents to having children. For many, children are seen as unaffordable luxuries rather than life milestones. The one-child policy set off a domino effect, reshaping China's demographic and economic landscape in ways that continue to unfold. From gender imbalances to labor shortages, elder care burdens to rural decline, the policy's legacy marriage strike is a complex young people of challenges that defy a quiet rebellion against marriage is reshaping societies across developed nations. In Japan, over 25% of 50-year-olds have never married, a figure that has quadrupled since 1980. South Korea sees similar trends, where nearly 40% of women in their 30s remain single, many actively rejecting what they term marriage imperialism. Across Europe, marriage rates have plummeted. Italy's dropped 45% since 1990, and Russia recorded its lowest ever number of weddings in 2022. This shift isn't just about delaying unions. Many young adults are opting out of partnership altogether. Financial instability drives much of this retreat. In Seoul, the average wedding and apartment deposit require 12 years of median income savings. Chinese millennials call marriage the three mountains: home purchase, car ownership, and wedding expenses that can exceed $200,000 in major cities. Japanese couples increasingly postpone weddings indefinitely, with semi-marriage arrangements, where partners maintain separate residences, gaining popularity. Surveys show 68% of unmarried Japanese cite economic insecurity as their primary reason for avoiding marriage, up from 42% in 2000. Career pressures further discourage partnerships. South Korea's 52-hour workweek legislation contains loopholes allowing unlimited overtime for managerial staff, leaving employees too drained for dating. Chinese tech workers face 996 schedules, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week, making sustained relationships nearly impossible. Italian temporary workers avoid long-term commitments due to contract uncertainties, with 72% delaying marriage until securing permanent positions. Russian professionals in informal jobs receive no parental benefits, effectively punishing family formation. In every corner of these societies, dating apps create unexpected paradoxes. While they provide access to potential partners, they also reduce committed relationships through choice overload. Tokyo's most popular dating app shows each user 120 potential matches daily, fostering endless searching rather than settling down. South Korean studies found app users go on more dates, but form fewer long-term relationships than those meeting through traditional channels. Even government-run platforms struggle. Singapore's matchmaking service achieves only a 3% marriage conversion rate despite heavy promotion. Gender role conflicts deepen the divide. South Korean women increasingly resent traditional expectations to quit jobs after childbirth while managing all household duties. The term "escape the corset" describes rejecting both beauty standards and marital expectations. Japanese women face similar pressures. Only 15% of managers are female despite equal education levels. Italian men perform Europe's least housework at just 1.5 hours daily, leaving working mothers with impossible double shifts. These unresolved tensions make marriage unappealing for educated women across all 5 countries. For some, the choice to remain single is deeply personal. Take Yumi, a 34-year-old Tokyo office worker who decided against marriage after watching her mother sacrifice her career for family. Yumi now spends her weekends hiking with friends and caring for her rescue dog, saying, "I've built a life that's mine." Stories like hers reflect a broader cultural reevaluation of happiness. A 2023 multinational survey showed 52% of respondents aged 18 to 34 believe lifelong partnerships are unnecessary for fulfillment. Pet ownership fills emotional gaps. Japan's pet industry now dwarfs its diaper market at $15 billion annually. Virtual relationships through gaming or anime provide alternate social outlets, particularly for Japanese herbivore men who avoid real-world dating. South Korea's Hanjak movement celebrates solitary living, with single-person households now comprising 40% of all homes. Governments attempt intervention with limited success. Japan's regional speed dating events often see women outnumber men 3-1. China's Communist Youth League mixers drew mockery when male attendees drastically outnumbered women. These efforts fail to address root causes. Matchmaking cannot resolve housing shortages or workplace discrimination. Demographic consequences multiply as singles age. Never married Japanese women over 50 now comprise 8% of the female population, compared to 1% in 1980. South Korea projects 30% of women born in 1990 will remain childless, up from 5% in previous generations. Pension systems designed around traditional family structures strain under these shifts. Japan's welfare ministry estimates 25% of seniors will have no family caregivers by 2040. Elderly singles face particular risks. Studies show unmarried Japanese men die 8 years earlier than married peers on average. Economic structures reinforce single lifestyles. Compact housing dominates urban development. Tokyo's share of studio apartments increased from 25% to 42% since 2000. Restaurants and grocery stores offer single portion packages, while appliance makers market miniature refrigerators and washing machines. South Korea's meal delivery apps report 70% of orders come from individual customers. These adaptations make single living increasingly convenient while reducing incentives to partner. What began as a temporary delay now appears to represent a permanent transformation of how societies organize personal relationships. The ultimate demographic impacts remain uncertain, but centuries-old family patterns may be disappearing within decades. The housing crisis that kills family plans. The global housing crisis has become one of the most significant barriers to family formation in developed nations. In Tokyo, young couples face a daunting challenge. Apartments cost 10 times the median annual income, and even rentals consume over half of a dual-income couple's earnings. Landlords often demand 6 months rent up front, making independence feel like an impossible dream. For many, this means delaying major life milestones. 42% of Japanese single adults aged 35 to 44 still live with their parents, unable to afford a place of their own. South Korea's housing market presents an equally stark reality. The John's system requires tenants to lock up life savings, often $100,000 or more for modest apartments, while monthly rents for even tiny studio units remain steep. Couples are forced to make tough choices. Endure 3-hour commutes from satellite cities or live separately in cramped one-room rentals. Government programs offer some relief, but they rarely cover more than a fraction of the costs, leaving many newlyweds stuck in limbo. Italy's housing struggles tell a similar story. Stagnant wages and restrictive rent controls leave young professionals trapped in temporary housing or sharing apartments well into middle age. Nearly 60% of Italians aged 25 to 34 still live with their parents, a sharp increase from previous decades. In southern Italy, abandoned homes sit vacant, too expensive to renovate, while the government's €1 home program attracts foreign buyers rather than helping local families. The result? A generation unable to move forward, with the average first-time homebuyer now in their 40s. In China, the situation is even more extreme. The average home in Beijing costs 35 times the median annual income, making it the least affordable housing market in the world. Some couples resort to divorce houses, legally separating to qualify for additional subsidized apartments while staying together in practice. Others squeeze into snail houses under 300 square feet, sacrificing basic comforts like kitchens. Speculation has fueled this crisis. Investors bought a quarter of new homes between 2015 and 2022, leaving many units empty while families struggle to find affordable options. Across Tokyo, Seoul, Italy, and Beijing, the housing crisis throttles family dreams. Living conditions directly shape decisions about starting families. In Japan, couples often won't consider having children until they secure at least 700 square feet of living space, a threshold most renters in Tokyo never reach. In Seoul, families cram into smaller units, with average living space per person shrinking to just 270 square feet. Italian census data shows that regions with higher homeownership rates have noticeably higher fertility rates, while in China, sociologists estimate that each additional 100 square feet of living space significantly increases the likelihood of having a second child. Government incentives, while well-intentioned, rarely address the root of the problem. Japan's housing subsidies cover only a small fraction of the average home price, and South Korea's lottery-based programs leave most eligible couples empty-handed. In Russia, subsidies for young families are often undermined by construction fraud, while Italy's first home bonus was exhausted almost immediately due to overwhelming demand. These efforts are no match for relentless price growth. Beijing housing, for instance, has appreciated 400% since 2005 despite repeated interventions. The psychological toll is profound. Korean millennials describe themselves as giving up on dating, marriage, and homeownership. In Japan, nearly 40% of single adults believe they will never own a home. Chinese social media is filled with terms like lying flat, reflecting a generation abandoning traditional aspirations. These attitudes ripple through society, contributing to demographic decline as people postpone or forego family life altogether. The housing crisis isn't just about numbers. It's about the dreams deferred and lives reshaped by an unrelenting struggle for stability. Work culture collides with parenting. Work culture in advanced economies often forces employees to choose between careers and families. In Japan, office workers face unspoken expectations to attend after-work drinking sessions called namakai. Leaving early can harm careers. A 2023 survey found 72% of working parents received negative reviews after reducing overtime. Despite government initiatives like Premium Friday, many companies still require face time, where employees remain at desks regardless of productivity. Parental leave is stigmatized. Only 7% of eligible fathers take their full leave. Women returning from maternity leave often face demotions, a practice so common it's called matahara, maternity harassment. South Korea's 52-hour workweek law, introduced in 2018, has loopholes that allow excessive hours. Companies exploit exemptions or manipulate timekeeping systems. 42% admitted falsifying records in audits. Actual working hours average 54 per week in large corporations, with some professionals clocking 70-plus hours during peak periods. The culture of presenteeism forces employees to stay late regardless of workload, and leaving on time is seen as slacking. Parenting becomes nearly impossible. Kindergartens close by 3 p.m., leaving parents with no options. Gender disparities are stark. Only 21% of mothers return to full-time jobs after childbirth, compared to 89% of fathers. Italy's labor market instability creates unique challenges. Temporary contracts, which account for 67% of new hires under 35, last an average of 14 months and rarely include parental benefits. Women aged 25 to 34 face a 28% unemployment rate, rising to 41% in southern regions. Those who do work often encounter rigid schedules. 85% of companies offer no flexible arrangements. Public sector jobs, which provide better conditions, are scarce, with only 13% of young workers securing permanent positions. Economic stagnation worsens the issue. Real wages grew just 1.2% between 2000 and 2022, while living costs rose 38%. China's tech sector exemplifies extreme work expectations with the 996 culture, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. Major firms like Alibaba and Huawei openly promote this schedule, framing it as a path to personal growth. A Xiaomi handbook claims, only by working hard until midnight can we achieve our dreams. These hours leave no time for parenting, forcing many tech workers to send their children to live with grandparents. After age 35, pressure intensifies as companies push out older employees in a practice called clearing the ranks. Parental leave policies exist on paper, but most avoid taking them. Last year, a Baidu engineer was publicly shamed for requesting paternity leave. Russia's informal employment sector creates additional barriers for parents. About 22% of workers lack formal contracts, excluding them from state parental benefits. Small businesses often fire pregnant employees or refuse to rehire them after maternity leave. 30% of mothers lose their jobs within a year of giving birth. For those with formal jobs, rigid schedules dominate. 82% of companies enforce strict clock-in systems without flexibility. Long commutes worsen the strain, with Moscow residents averaging 2.5 hours daily in transit. Economic sanctions have further eroded conditions as firms cut benefits and increased hours to maintain output. These workplace norms force parents into impossible choices. A South Korean mother described missing her child's first school play because her manager refused to let her leave early, saying, "Work comes first." Such pressures have measurable demographic effects. Japanese companies offering true flexible hours saw 18% higher fertility rates among female employees. South Korean firms allowing remote work during COVID recorded 23% more pregnancies. Italian temporary workers have 0.7 fewer children on average than permanent staff. Chinese tech workers delay marriage by 7 years and have fewer children than peers in state-owned enterprises. Russian women in informal jobs have fertility rates 0.5 points lower than those in formal employment. Workplace structures also reinforce gender inequalities. Japanese women make up 75% of part-time workers, leaving them financially dependent on partners. South Korean women's salaries plateau after age 35, while men's continue rising. Italian mothers face a 30% wage penalty per child. Chinese women are scrutinized over marital status, with job applications often requiring disclosure of pregnancy plans. Russian firms openly discriminate. 61% of job ads specify gender preferences, with most administrative roles marked for women under 30 without children. Gender inequality, the hidden fertility factor. Gender inequality is a significant but often underappreciated factor driving declining birth rates in advanced economies. In South Korea, women face severe career setbacks after having children, a phenomenon known as the motherhood penalty. Within 5 years of giving birth, Korean mothers earn 33% less than their childless female colleagues, and only 12% return to management tracks after maternity leave. Despite women comprising 45% of entry-level hires, just 5% of corporate executives are female. These barriers heavily influence reproductive decisions. 68% of educated Korean women delay childbearing indefinitely due to career concerns. Some companies even pressure female employees to sign undated resignation letters, which are activated upon pregnancy. Japan faces a similar challenge, where highly educated women remain underrepresented in leadership roles. Women make up 48% of university graduates, but hold only 15% of management positions. The career track system funnels women into temporary clerical roles, while men secure stable, long-term employment. For working mothers, the lack of support is stark. Only 25% of companies offer on-site daycare, and many women returning from maternity leave face demotion by refrigerator, assigned to empty offices with no responsibilities until they resign. Meanwhile, just 18% of Japanese men take parental leave, compared to 75% of Swedish fathers. These dynamics suppress fertility rates, with women holding graduate degrees averaging 0.8 fewer children than those with high school diplomas. In Italy, the imbalance of household labor further discourages childbearing. Italian men perform just 1.5 hours of daily housework, the lowest among OECD nations, while working mothers shoulder 83% of childcare and domestic duties. This burden is reflected in fertility statistics. Employed Italian women have 0.5 fewer children than their non-working peers. Traditional attitudes persist, with 43% of Italians believing women should prioritize family over work. Workplace structures reinforce these norms, as less than 12% of companies offer flexible schedules. However, regions with more equitable housework distribution maintain fertility rates 0.3 points above the national average, highlighting the impact of shared responsibilities. China's one-child policy left lasting gender imbalances that now hinder family formation. The male-to-female birth ratio peaked at 121 to 100 in 2005 and remains skewed at 114 to 100 today. This has created a surplus of 34 million men who may never marry due to a shortage of eligible partners. At the same time, many educated women reject traditional roles entirely. The 4B movement, no dating, no sex, no marriage, no children, is gaining traction among urban professionals. Workplace discrimination remains pervasive. 85% of job ads specify gender preferences, and some require candidates to submit menstrual cycle information. Marriage registrations have plummeted 40% since 2013, with over 25% of urban Chinese women aged 30 remaining single, up from 5% in 2000. Russia's policies actively reinforce traditional gender roles. The government promotes the Mother Heroine Award for women with 10 or more children while restricting abortion access in 23 regions. Feminist organizations face increasing pressure, with over 15 groups disbanded since 2021. Workplace protections are often ignored. 55% of firms fail to comply with maternity leave requirements. Stay-at-home mothers receive modest subsidies but face economic vulnerability, as divorced women with children account for 80% of Russia's poor households. Fertility rates are 0.7 points higher in Muslim-majority regions, where traditionalism remains strongest compared to European Russia. Across these nations, the incompatibility between modern female aspirations and outdated social structures is evident. South Korean women now spend 7.3 more years in education than their mothers, but enter workplaces designed for 1970s male breadwinners. Japanese female university graduates often fill temporary OL office lady roles instead of career track positions. Italian professional women face the soffitto di cristallo crystal ceiling, while Chinese tech firms openly favor male engineers. Russian legislation even prohibits women from 456 specific occupations, citing protective reasons. Economic models confirm the demographic impact of gender equality. OECD data shows that every 10% increase in female labor participation correlates with a 0.07 rise in fertility rates, up to certain thresholds. Nordic countries exemplify this gender equity effect, where shared domestic responsibilities stabilize birth rates near replacement levels. Conversely, nations with the largest gender gaps, Japan, South Korea, and Italy, experience the steepest fertility declines. The pension time bomb. The pension crisis unfolding across aging societies stems from a simple math problem: too few workers supporting too many retirees. In Japan, the worker-to-retiree ratio has already dropped to 2 to 1 and is projected to fall to 1.3 to 1 by 2050. This imbalance drives deficits exceeding 2 trillion yen annually, covered by government borrowing. Workers contribute 18.3% of their salaries, the highest rate among developed nations. Yet average monthly payouts have fallen 6% in real terms since 2000. Nearly a quarter of retirees now work past age 65 to make ends meet. While the government has raised eligibility ages from 60 to 65 since 1994, further increases face strong public resistance. The math tells a troubling story: fewer workers, higher contributions, and shrinking benefits. Italy's pension system paints an equally dire picture. The country spends 16% of GDP on retirement benefits, double the OECD average. Contribution rates have climbed to 33% of salaries, yet the system still requires 40 billion euros in annual subsidies. Southern regions like Calabria now have more pensioners than active workers, and without structural reforms, pension spending could reach 22% of GDP by 2040. Immigration helps sustain the system. Foreign workers contribute 12% of funding, despite being just 8% of the population. But this is not enough to offset the growing burden. Most Italians still retire at 67, and recent reforms allowing gradual retirement from age 62 have done little to ease the strain. South Korea's pension system faces insolvency within decades. The National Pension Service projects fund depletion by 2055, with reserve ratios dropping from 8 to 1 in 2010 to 4 to 1 today. Contribution rates have risen from 3% in 1988 to 9% currently, with plans to reach 13% by 2028, but payouts remain meager, averaging just 500,000 Korean wons, $380, monthly, far below the minimum living wage for seniors. The system's design exacerbates a crisis. It launched in 1988 with 16 workers per retiree, a ratio now at 5 to 1 and expected to hit 2 to 1 by 2040. Nearly 60% of elderly South Koreans live in relative poverty, the highest rate among OECD nations. China's pension challenges stem from the 4-2-1 problem created by the one-child policy, one child supporting 2 parents and 4 grandparents. Urban pension funds already run deficits, with some regions like Heilongjiang exhausting reserves as early as 2016. Rural pensions offer just 179 yen, $25, monthly, forcing many elderly farmers to work into their 70s. Contribution rates vary widely. creating disparities between state enterprises and private firms. A $300 billion central pension fund established in 2017 is projected to cover only 20% of liabilities by 2035. Migrant workers, who make up a significant portion of the labor force, face additional hurdles, with only 23% participating in pension systems. Russia's pension system struggles under demographic and economic pressures. Retirement ages were raised in 2019 to 60 for women and 65 for men, sparking nationwide protests. Pension reserves cover just 18 months of payments, and regional disparities are stark, with Moscow pensions averaging 25,000 Russian ruble monthly compared to 12,000 Russian ruble in rural areas. The war in Ukraine has worsened the situation, with inflation eroding fixed pension values. Oil revenues temporarily prop up the system, but youth emigration and declining workforce numbers. Russia loses 500,000 working-age citizens annually, threaten its long-term viability. These systems share a common flaw. They were designed for growing populations. Japan's system, for instance, launched in 1961 with 11 workers per retiree, a ratio that has since collapsed. Retirement ages have not kept pace with life expectancy gains, and low fertility rates guarantee future crises. Funding shortfalls force difficult choices, raising premiums, cutting benefits, or relying on risky investments. Without reform, the demographic math leaves few palatable options, and the consequences partial solutions or political for generations to come. Japan's immigration approach remains cautious despite severe labor shortages. The government introduced the Specified Skilled Worker Visa in 2019 to bring in 345,000 foreign workers over 5 years, a fraction of the estimated 6.74 million worker deficit by 2040. Applicants must pass Japanese language exams and skills tests, with most visas tied to specific industries like construction, nursing, and food services. Yet, integration challenges persist in this homogeneous society. A 2023 Justice Ministry survey revealed that 78% of foreign workers report experiencing discrimination. Many face housing denials. Landlords in Tokyo refuse 60% of rental applications from non-Japanese tenants. The system discourages long-term settlement, with only 2% of visa holders qualifying for permanent residency. For instance, Vietnamese caregivers hired by nursing homes often receive no language training or career advancement opportunities. Despite comprising 15% of elderly care staff, many live in employer dormitories with curfews, underscoring their cultural and social isolation. South Korea faces similar struggles balancing labor needs with cultural resistance. The employment permit system brings in 55,000 foreign workers annually, primarily from Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines for manufacturing, agriculture, and fisheries. However, these workers face strict limitations, such as mandatory employer changes every 3 years and restrictions on bringing families. Language barriers remain significant. Only 12% of migrant factory workers achieve conversational Korean after 5 years. Discrimination is systemic, with foreigners earning 28% less than Koreans for identical work in small and medium enterprises. Marriage migrants, mostly women from Southeast Asia marrying rural bachelors, face unique challenges. About 7,000 such marriages occur annually, but 42% end in divorce within 5 years, often leaving women undocumented and impoverished. Government programs like Korean language classes and cultural orientation see low participation, with only 38% of eligible migrants attending. Meanwhile, xenophobic attitudes persist. An anti-foreigner petition opposing mosque construction gathered 700,000 signatures in 2023. Italy's immigration tensions reflect stark regional disparities. Northern factories in Lombardy and Veneto depend on 1.2 million foreign workers, primarily Romanians, Albanians, and Moroccans, to sustain production, filling 15% of manufacturing jobs and 32% of agricultural positions. In contrast, southern Italy struggles with high unemployment despite labor shortages, as locals reject undesirable work. The government issues just 30,000 work permits annually, far below the estimated 150,000 immigrants needed to stabilize population declines. Integration policies vary. Milan offers free language courses and housing assistance, while Sicilian towns provide no services. Seasonal agricultural workers face harsh conditions, with over 100,000 living in makeshift settlements without running water. Political rhetoric exacerbates tensions. During the 2023 election campaign, debates centered on replacing African migrants with Ukrainian refugees deemed more compatible with Christian values. Despite these contradictions, Italy's pension system depends on immigrants, who contribute 18% of receipts. China's immigration strategy focuses narrowly on attracting high-skilled talent. The Thousand Talents program has repatriated 8,000 overseas Chinese professionals since 2008, offering relocation packages exceeding $150,000. Yet, permanent residency remains rare, with only 1,500 green cards issued annually. Points-based systems in cities like Shanghai aim to attract Hong Kong and Macau residents, approving 12,000 applications in 2023. However, foreign professionals often face cultural obstacles. Only 45% renew contracts after their initial terms. The broader immigrant population remains minuscule, at just 0.1% of China's total, with most holding temporary work or study visas. Universities recruit 500,000 international students annually, but fewer than 5% stay post-graduation. Meanwhile, manufacturing zones employ 250,000 Southeast Asian workers under tightly controlled conditions, with many living in factory dormitories and facing deportation for labor activism. Russia's reliance on Central Asian migrants highlights the demographic challenges of aging societies. An estimated 4.5 million Uzbeks, Tajiks, and Kyrgyz work in Russia, primarily in construction, utilities, and services. These migrants contribute 12% of Social Security payments, despite comprising just 7% of workers. However, xenophobia runs deep. Hate crimes against Central Asians rose 45% in 2023, with only 1 in 10 cases prosecuted. The war in Ukraine worsened conditions, as authorities forcibly conscripted 18,000 migrants in 2022 before international outcry halted the practice. Citizenship schemes, such as the 2019 Simplified program, granted 700,000 passports, though ethnic Russians received priority. Regional disparities persist. Moscow enforces aggressive document checks, while Far East employers often confiscate passports. Remittances underscore the dependency. Tajikistan receives 42% of its GDP from workers in Russia, yet 37% report unpaid wages annually. Immigration offers partial relief to labor shortages, but remains fraught with political and cultural challenges. Japan's nursing homes struggle to retain foreign caregivers due to language barriers, while South Korean manufacturers offshore production rather than hire more Southeast Asian workers. Italy's agriculture sector loses 1 billion euros annually in unpicked harvests, and Russia's reliance on Central Asians fuels xenophobic tensions. These cases reveal the growing disconnect between economic needs and cultural resistance, leaving aging societies grappling with unresolved dilemmas. Automation, economic lifeline or job killer. Japan's automation push has transformed elder care, deploying over 5,000 assistive robots in nursing homes since 2020. The Reba lifting robot moves patients from beds to wheelchairs with hydraulic precision, reducing caregiver injuries. Paro therapeutic seal robots provide companionship for dementia patients, decreasing agitation episodes by 40%. However, these innovations come at a social cost. Facilities using robots report 30% fewer family visits, and some seniors feel processed rather than cared for when robots handle intimate tasks like bathing. The government aims for 80% automation in care facilities by 2025, reducing human staff ratios from 1 to 3 to 1 to 8 residents. South Korea leads in industrial automation, with robot density reaching 1,000 per 10,000 workers in 2023. Hyundai's Ulsan plant operates with 60% fewer workers than in 2018, thanks to automated welding and assembly lines. Samsung's lights-off factories produce 200,000 smartphones daily without human involvement, boosting productivity by 25%. Yet, employment in manufacturing has fallen 12% since 2015, and only 35% of displaced workers find comparable jobs, often in lower-paid service roles. Labor unions resist these changes. A 2023 strike at Kia Motors halted production for weeks over plans to replace 5,000 positions with robots. Italy's small businesses struggle to adopt automation. Only 12% of firms with fewer than 50 employees use advanced robotics, as costs remain prohibitive. A basic packaging robot costs 150,000 euros, equivalent to 5 years of a warehouse worker's salary. Many businesses close instead. 22,000 SMEs shuttered in 2022, eliminating 180,000 jobs. Textile manufacturers in Prato face stiff competition from Chinese firms that automated and cut prices by 40%, while Italian companies relying on artisanal methods lose market share. Government subsidies cover just 20% of automation costs, leaving family businesses unable to compete. Large firms like Ferrari thrive with robotics, but small producers disappear, deepening economic divides. China's automation strategy offsets workforce declines while enhancing control. Foxconn replaced 400,000 factory jobs with robots since 2020. AI systems monitor workers in real time. Alibaba's smart factory tracks movements and flags inefficiencies. Facial recognition automates payroll, but also enforces political compliance, cross-checking workers against police databases. Factories in Shenzhen deduct pay for behavioral violations like excessive bathroom breaks, integrating workplace automation with the social credit system. While industrial productivity rose 8%, constant surveillance erodes worker privacy and stifles creativity. Russia prioritizes military automation, with over 60% of state tech funding directed toward unmanned systems. Lancet kamikaze drone production reached 5,000 units monthly in 2023. Civilian sectors lag. Only 8% of manufacturers use industrial robots, compared to 25% globally. Sanctions have worsened the gap, cutting imported automation components by 70% since 2022. Domestic alternatives are costly and inefficient. Russia-made assembly robots cost 300% more than Chinese models, while being 40% less effective. Military factories automate tank production, but civilian plants rely on outdated Soviet-era equipment, leaving consumer goods production to decline by 12%. Each approach has unintended consequences. Japanese caregivers report losing meaningful connections as robots take over care tasks. 78% say their jobs feel less fulfilling. South Korea's automated factories run like clockwork, but eliminate pathways to skilled middle-class jobs. Italy's resistance to automation preserves some artisanal roles, but sacrifices entire industries to foreign competition. China maintains productivity, but at the cost of worker privacy and innovation. Russia's military focus leaves civilian industries uncompetitive, with outdated infrastructure and services. Despite these challenges, some workers adapt. In South Korea, engineers specializing in automation saw wages rise 25%, while Japan projects a need for 380,000 robot technicians by 2030. Italy's artisans take pride in handmade goods, even as orders decline. In China, factory workers appreciate robots handling dangerous tasks, though they resent constant monitoring. These stories highlight the human side of automation. Progress comes with trade-offs, and the balance between efficiency and humanity remains elusive. Policy experiments. What actually works? Hungary's family policies demonstrate how financial incentives can influence birth rates when sustained over time. Since 2010, the government has implemented loan forgiveness programs for mothers, wiping out up to $35,000 in student debt per child. Couples who marry before age 40 qualify for subsidized mortgages at 3% interest, half the market rate. The country also offers tax exemptions worth 30% of salary for mothers with 3 or more children. These measures contributed to a fertility rate increase from 1.23 in 2011 to 1.55 in 2021, one of Europe's largest rebounds. However, critics note the policies disproportionately help middle-class families, while poorer Hungarians still struggle with housing and childcare costs. Despite improvements, the national birth rate remains below replacement level, and population decline continues. Estonia's approach highlights the potential and limitations of targeted fertility treatments. The government covers all IVF costs for women under 38, resulting in over 5,000 assisted births since 2017. Approximately 8% of Estonian births now involve IVF, compared to 2% in neighboring Finland. The program increased total births by about 600 annually, not enough to offset emigration losses of 3,000 young adults yearly. Other measures include monthly child allowances of €80 per child and 18 months of paid parental leave. While Estonia's fertility rate rose from 1.6 to 1.8 since 2015, workforce declines continue as young families leave for higher wages elsewhere in the EU. This underscores how fertility support alone cannot compensate for broader economic weaknesses. In contrast to Estonia's health-focused strategy, Singapore's experience shows that financial incentives alone fail without structural support. Since 1987, the government has offered cash grants up to $10,000 per child, yet fertility rates kept falling, hitting a record low of 1.05 in 2023. Recent changes pairing payments with housing access show more promise. Couples who produce a child within 3 years of marriage now jump public housing waitlists, a crucial perk in a city where 80% live in government-built flats. This policy contributed to a slight uptick. Fertility rose to 1.12 last year among those qualifying for housing perks. However, broader challenges persist. Childcare costs consume 40% of median household income, and workplace discrimination against mothers remains widespread. Singapore's case suggests financial incentives only work when they remove tangible barriers to family formation. France showcases how comprehensive childcare enables higher fertility. The country operates 14,000 publicly funded creches, providing full-time care from 6 months old. Parents pay an income-based fee averaging €300 monthly, one-third the cost of private options. Combined with generous parental leave, 3 years per child with job protection and tax benefits, France maintains Europe's second highest fertility rate at 1.83. Working mothers in France average 2.1 children versus 1.4 in neighboring Germany, where childcare spots are scarce. While rural areas face provider shortages, the core principle holds. When societies make combining work and parenting feasible, birth rates stabilize at higher levels than peer nations. These cases reveal key policy patterns. Financial incentives succeed when large enough to meaningfully alter family economics. Hungary's student debt cancellation represents about 2 years' average salary. Targeted health interventions, like Estonia's IVF program, can help but don't change fundamentals. Emigration still drained potential parents. Housing access appears crucial. Singapore saw better results linking baby bonuses to tangible homeownership opportunities than decades of standalone cash grants. France proves structural support matters more than handout amounts. Its childcare spending equals just 0.8% of GDP, but enables high female workforce participation. Long-term commitment distinguishes effective policies. Hungary maintained its programs through 3 election cycles despite budget pressures. Estonia has funded IVF treatments continuously since 1997, gradually expanding eligibility. France's childcare network took 30 years to build, achieving national coverage by 2010. Temporary measures consistently fail. Japan's one-time Angel Plan payments in the 1990s saw no lasting fertility impact. No silver bullet exists. Each country's partial successes suggest pathways rather than prescriptions. Hungary proves large financial incentives can move birth rates, but warns against neglecting lower-income parents. Estonia shows health interventions help but require economic foundations. Singapore demonstrates how addressing housing changes calculations. France exemplifies system-wide support enabling work-family balance. Together, they underscore that reversing demographic decline requires sustained, multifaceted approaches, not temporary or isolated measures. Cultural shifts redefine family life. A fundamental redefinition of family life is underway across aging societies. In Japan, 38% of adults aged 18 to 34 report prioritizing personal hobbies and travel over marriage or children, triple the rate from 2000. Surveys show young South Koreans spending more monthly on language classes and fitness memberships than savings for future families. Italian census data reveals adults under 40 allocate 22% of income to leisure activities compared to just 8% for child-related expenses. The percentage of Japanese women who consider marriage necessary dropped from 75% in 1990 to 32% in 2023. These shifts reflect a profound reshaping of life priorities, where traditional milestones like marriage and parenthood are no longer central. Pet ownership has emerged as a striking alternative to traditional family structures. Japan's pet industry reached 1.7 trillion yen last year, surpassing spending on children's education for the first time. Tokyo apartments catering to pet owners now outnumber those designed for families. South Korea's animal medicine market grew 240% since 2015, while pediatric services declined. Italian seniors are 60% more likely to own pets than grandchildren, according to national statistics. In China, the pet economy expanded to 500 billion yen despite overall consumer spending slowdowns. These trends suggest that emotional needs once fulfilled through children are now being redirected. In Seoul, luxury pet strollers costing 1.5 million Korean won sell faster than baby carriages, a vivid symbol of this cultural shift. Single-person households dominate urban landscapes, reshaping how cities are designed and lived in. Tokyo wards report 48% of residences contain just one occupant, up from 20% in 1990. South Korea's one-person households now comprise 40% of all homes, prompting the construction of tiny housing units under 200 square feet. Italian single dwellers spend 35% more on food delivery than families, a market worth 3 billion euros annually. Even in family-oriented China, 26% of urban millennials live alone, triple the rate of their parents' generation. Moscow's housing data shows studios outselling two-bedroom units 3 to 1 among buyers under 35. Developers are responding to these trends, with Japanese builders now constructing 7 single-occupancy units for every traditional family apartment. Digital relationships are filling spaces once occupied by physical connections. Over 3,000 Japanese men hold official marriages with virtual anime characters through specialized apps. South Korea's mini-room craze sees young adults curating elaborate virtual apartments instead of dating, with the platform attracting 8 million monthly users. Italian psychiatrists report 15% of single patients under 40 prefer AI chatbots to human interaction. In China, love replacement services rent out virtual partners for texting and video calls, generating 2 billion yen last year. Russian gaming platforms add romantic storylines, with 45% of female players under 30 preferring in-game relationships to real ones. These digital surrogates highlight a growing preference for controlled, low-risk interactions over the complexities of real-world relationships. These behavioral shifts ripple through economies. Japan's baby product manufacturers now target pet owners. Stroller maker Combi derives 40% of revenue from animal products. South Korean department stores replace children's floors with pet spas and robotic companionship centers. Italy's appliance makers focus on single-serving models, with sales of compact rice cookers growing 180% since 2018. China's largest dating app saw user activity drop 25% as younger cohorts turned to gaming communities instead. Russia's wedding industry has contracted 18% annually since 2019, while virtual event platforms grow. These adaptations reflect a world increasingly designed for individuals rather than families. The cumulative effect is striking. Japan's latest population, survey shows under 30s spending 5.7 hours daily on screens versus 12 minutes interacting in person. South Korean clinics report treating digital dementia in patients under 25 unable to focus offline. Italian schools introduce AI emotion coaches as children show declining social skills. China's youth unemployment crisis worsens as applicants prefer virtual internships to real workplaces. Russia's military notes recruits struggle with teamwork after years of isolated gaming. These data points suggest societies are reorganizing around individualism, with profound demographic implications. As traditional family structures fade, what will replace them? Will societies adapt to shrinking populations, or will new forms of connection emerge to fill the void? The answers may redefine what it means to belong in the 21st century.